It is now 7 p.m. and I call the October 6th, 2020 Finance Committee of the Lisle Library District Board of Trustees to order. I would like to add the Lisle Library District recognizes Governor Pritzker's Executive Order number 2020-07 and the Government Emergency Administration Act number 100-06-40, which suspends certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act, allowing library trustees to participate remotely. Would you please call the roll?
Thomas Duffy.
Here.
Jenny Norton.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Tatiana Weinstein. Here. Beth McClellan. Here.
Excellent. Okay, the first item on the agenda after roll call is opportunity for visitors to speak. Are there any visitors today who wish to speak?
No.
Director indicating none. I have none at home who wish to speak. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, and perhaps before going any further, if anyone wishes to make a motion to reorder any of the items on the agenda, there was some talk of that. We could have a motion for that at any time. Hearing no motions at this time, moving on to agenda item 3, approving the minutes of the September 24th, 2019 Finance Committee meeting. Please let me know if anyone has a motion to approve these minutes.
This is Trustee Duffy. I move to approve the minutes of the September 24th, 2019 Finance Committee meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. That was Liz Sullivan with the second. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing no interest in discussion, can we please take a vote?
Thomas Duffy.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye. Motion passes. Oh, there's more? Were there more of us?
I guess so. Aye.
Ex officio Tom Hummel? Okay, gotcha. Great, motion passes. Okay, again, waiting to see if anyone has any interest in reordering agenda items. Otherwise, we will move on to the next agenda item, item 4. Okay.
You know, I would prefer to reorder the agenda items so that we handle, we move the first item down to the bottom so that we talk about
Before the discussion of reporting and reformatting.
Yes, I would like to handle that if we have time. But to me, the other items are more pressing.
Are you making a formal motion, Trustee Sullivan?
Yes, that is a formal motion to move the items having to do with formatting reports down to the end of the meeting.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I believe that was Trustee Duffy with the second. Okay, any discussion on the reordering of item number 4 on the agenda to the end, which would be 6 before adjournment?
I just had one thing to mention. You can move it to the end, and I think Trustee Sullivan mentioned that if time remains, you can also table it if you'd like to table it to the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, the motion currently was to move it, but not to table unless we need to table it. All right. So we'll do another motion to table if we decide we run out of time. Does that sound like what we're all hearing? Okay, great. So no discussion. Then shall we vote again, get a roll call on this motion?
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Thomas Duffy.
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are reordering agenda item 4 to the end just before adjournment. Excellent. That brings our next agenda item up to, excuse us, capital improvements, financial planning discussion. So I will turn it over to Director Weinstein for presenting this topic.
Okay. Excuse me. So this is on the agenda because the board has discussed the possible issuance of debt for a library enhancement project. And our owner's rep was able to connect with a financial advisor to provide a general analysis of financing options back in December of 2019. It seems like it was just a few months ago, but it was back in December of 2019. And that report can be found on the library's website under the LLD capital project link. And the two most likely options discussed at that meeting were alternative revenue bonds or debt certificates. And this particular advisor focused more on the alternative revenue bonds, but there are other options out there, such as debt certificates or promissory notes, which might be better for lower amounts of debt and where an organization has good credit, which we do, and options that are you may be able to pay from your general operating fund, which we already have a system in place for doing that with our special reserve savings. So again, that particular advisor didn't go into detail regarding other funding types really, but I do want to mention that we received that general analysis free of charge. So I just want to make a point of that. However, I think it would benefit the library to explore in full what options could be best for us should the library choose to issue some debt. So I preemptively called the financial advisor who originally provided the general analysis. I also called a highly rated advisor who works very closely with Ellers, our investment firm. And then I called 4 other major financial advisors in our area to basically gauge their interest in providing us with what I term as a qualification package. So I just have to say it's been very difficult trying to connect with the advisors. Everybody's working from home, and there are very few working in an office environment any longer, so it's been kind of a phone tag. But I was able to connect with 4 of the 6 advisors who I had on my list to get kind of a feel for what would be in store for us. So what I can do is I can ask those advisors to provide a qualification packet with some general fee structures, and so that the committee or the board in full can review and select someone to work with, because I think we need that expertise to analyze our funds and to select that best funding option for us if in fact we issue any debt. I'd like to have a minimum of 3, but I can ask all 6 again if the other 2 call me back to provide more info for this committee and for the entire board. It would be very similar to what the physical plant committee went through in selecting CCS as our owner's rep. I can provide an outline of firms, supplemental info, and then some pricing, structured pricing, and then the committee can review and then recommend, or again, can go directly to the board. It depends on how you discuss what comes of this discussion. And as for pricing, I did try to feel them out again, and it's pretty standard. So it's through my phone conversations, basically pricing generally depends on the amount of debt issued. So if you issue more debt, it's a higher percentage of cost, and if the debt is a lower amount in, let's say, the $2 to $3 million range, the service fee could be a flat fee. And that fee, if it was within that smaller range of debt issuance, it could range anywhere between, and they give me broad windows, $10,000 to $15,000 for that service fee, or depending on the amount, depending on the product we choose. So I just wanted to lay out some basics in terms of financial advisors and how you'd like to go about selecting somebody. We could go with the person who provided us the general analysis. We could work with someone who's very comfortable and that Ellers works with, or we can ask for RFQs from the 6 I've already connected or tried to connect with. How would you like to proceed?
I would like the committee members, other than the chair, to speak up first. I don't want to hog the conversation.
Is there any way, you know how PMA, I think that was their name, who came out and talked about bonds? They kind of went over at least for me, it was a real education about what bonds were all about. And coming from the corporate world and dealing in the departments I dealt with, I never knew anything about bonds. That was very helpful to me. Is there any way we can get one of these companies to kind of come in and do an overview of what these alternative financing arrangements are, just to educate us?
I'm sure that could happen. I can also pull up some general information, I mean, text-wise, from an org, a .org or an agency that could help us kind of define the different options. But I'd like to know if the committee would like a selection to choose from in terms of advisors, or do you want, like the physical plant committee did in terms of choosing an owner's rep, or do you want to just pick somebody now? I mean, how do you want to select an advisor to inform the board and work with the board is the question.
I don't know yet that whether or not we need one, because I don't know if there'll be something that after we get educated about these are the options, I don't know whether we'll need one, is my personal opinion. I don't know. Anybody else?
I feel like we've put our confidence in the owner's rep to this point to kind of lead us through things. Back in December, correct me if I'm wrong, PMA was, at least in part, selected through CCS's, because the materials were kind of combined in that meeting in December, if I recall correctly. So they have some impression of PMA. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, I know that CCS has a connection with PMA, but I don't think they were recommending per se.
Right, sure, yeah, they may not take it that far, but again, I look to our owner's rep to help us figure out what needs to be outsourced, what we cannot do ourselves in-house in terms of cash flow analysis in order to.
You're right there. It does recommend if we are going to issue debt in any amount, that we should work with a professional in the field, because there is a number of steps we have to take statutorily depending on the route we take. So again, if we and analyzing our funds in general in terms of our fund balances and how much to use from special reserves and things like, we need someone to help us with that. That is in that kind of field. We don't have a financial manager on staff any longer. I can do my best with that, but I would definitely feel more comfortable having someone who's more adept at that kind of analysis.
I guess my other question would be, what is or is not in scope with our current contract with Ehlers?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Ehlers obviously has provided cash flow analysis in the past that maintain the investment detail. So, and they have offered to do reports for us in the past. So I'm not sure where they're already contractually willing and able without any incremental costs, and where even if there was incremental cost, that because we already partner with them, that they would give us a favorable, already client rate.
They can absolutely help us with analyzing our fund balances, but they cannot help us with any issuance of debt because they are now working out of Wisconsin solely. They used to work in Illinois. So they have partnered with another firm in Illinois if we were to issue debt or debt certificates or promissory notes in Illinois, and we would work in partnership with Ehlers plus this other firm. So they could certainly help us with the analysis, but if we went that extra step, it would be best practice to work with a expert in the field of debt issuance.
I have a few questions. So Treasurer Norton or Tatiana, correct me or walk me through these as I go. So it sounds like one, the company that did the cash flow analysis and the audit, the one we were just talking about, I didn't catch the name precisely. They are operating in Wisconsin now, not in Illinois, and could not do any management or advising related to financing or debt service or bonds, any of that stuff, because of the relationship, the fact they don't exist in this state any longer.
Right.
And that the question that we're being asked is, okay, we know that there will be to some degree some type of financing in some level. I think that independent of the lowest number that we spend or to the highest number when we kind of went through our larger committee, that we kind of had that range. But we need someone to advise us as to what's the best way to do it, and how does it manage within our cash flow projections, right? Because I know Trustee Sullivan's talked about this, is it's not that you just get the money right tomorrow. You may get it in a year and a half because of the fact that payments are, staged at different times, so you may not need the money till the end. So that can impact how much you have to borrow, because we may have to borrow even less than what we think we would have at the total of the project, because of the fact that of our own money that we have yearly in our fiscal year. So is that really, I'm trying to make sure I encapsulate, did I touch everything just to a T there as to what's being asked, right? Okay. And with that in mind, I would like to follow a process where, since CCS doesn't have a specific one in mind, or maybe they can tell a couple of other ones that you should, but I would like to go through some type of, I'm going to call it RFP, or some type of system in which we select them. I don't know I don't know how much it's going to cost, right? Like, I know there's certain dollar amounts where you really want to go high and you really want to do the RFP. But I do think that it's such a big decision, right? It's a decision that we make that has ramifications 20, 30 years from now. I would rather go through the process of some type of vetting to identify an advisor or advisors, that walk us through this point. I get that we may become educated on it, but there's a difference between having base knowledge versus having years of knowledge that make sure that we can save even some money down the road by a decision that we may not have known because of our lack of in-depth knowledge. I apologize for the filibuster there, but I hope that kind of as I listen to it, walk through my thinking.
Thank you, Tom. I don't think you even got halfway through the phone book. That was fine. That was totally fine. Anyways, so we're returning back to Director Weinstein's original question. Now that we all kind of have a baseline understanding of what is, being considered here, that we say, all right, so how many is sort of the question of how many are we looking for to consider? And I don't think there's any, obviously fewer than 100 and more than one, right? So, but, as far as like, what's the magic right number? I don't know, 5-ish, and just throwing a number out there, that it doesn't feel to me like it needs to be a grand number, just enough of a sample to know what the fair market value is, that we know that there isn't, just, people that are trying to take it as far as they can financially, that we can see what a competitive price is.
I think, go ahead, Trustee Sullivan.
I'm having a problem paying $10,000 to $15,000 for this advice. It's like paying for somebody to tell you to go into mutual funds and then paying a load on those mutual funds. It's like paying twice.
Well, I guess
So-
just the question that we're being asked doesn't commit us to anything other than figuring out how many to consider, and then we find out what their price is, and we can go from there.
And maybe I wasn't clear. Maybe I wasn't clear, Trustee Sullivan. When I was throwing that number out again, I was just talking to these firms on the phone. It was 4 of the 6 I had on my list. And I was just ballparking numbers. Let's say we went out for a $3 million bond or something. And they were very hesitant to give me a quote because, of course, we haven't determined anything yet. So when I'm saying between 10 and 15,000, it could be from 7 to 9. I mean, they threw a number of ballpark numbers at me. And it all depends on, again, the product we choose, the amount of debt we issue, if we issue it. So we wouldn't be writing a check for $15,000 to company A to have them come in here and talk to us. What we're trying to do here is determine how to select a firm if in fact we went forward with issuing debt.
Well, I guess what I understand, you don't spend money when you issue an RFQ, you only spend money when you choose somebody to do something. But there's the time and energy that goes into creating an RFQ, which is a lot of staff time, a lot of staff energy. I guess my preference, it doesn't matter to me that Ellers is only operating in Wisconsin, because I think they should be able to give us advice on what's the difference between the different financing tools that are available. That's my personal opinion, because frankly, I'm not sure what we pay them for, because that's a whole nother issue. Let's not get into that. I mean, it's kind of like we're going to pay a load for whatever instrument we choose. And now we're going to pay a second load to have somebody give us advice on which instrument to choose. And I would hope that if we get ourselves educated about the various instruments, we could decide which instrument would be best for us by getting ourselves educated without hiring somebody to tell us which instrument is best for us. That's just my personal opinion.
We can use Ellers for that information, but if we are issuing debt, we would still be paying a price for issuing the debt through a service that can offer us that service. But we can utilize Ellers for the info.
Okay, and I guess what I'm not understanding then, what are we issuing an RFQ for? Maybe I'm just not getting it.
It would, well, again, it's not going to be an RFQ, something like we issued for the architect. It would be more asking for a statement of qualification of a particular firm who could offer services that, if we were to issue alternate revenue bonds. Ellers can't do that for us. That's just an example,
right,
because it's out of Wisconsin. So if we wanted to issue alternate revenue bonds, we have to find a financial advisor who can do that in Illinois. And then we'd be paying that financial advisor whatever price, depending on the amount we issue for that service.
So is alternate revenue bonds the only avenue that we have to pursue, or are there others?
There are many, well, I won't say many, a handful of others that we may want to pursue. And your question earlier about can Ellers help us make that choice? I'm sure they can educate us about the different options, absolutely, but so can any other firm that can issue those products to us. And that's what I was trying to pull together here is let's find someone who can do it for us in state. There are a number of firms, there are 5 or 6 firms that I think can help us out in that respect. But if you wanted to take the extra step of engaging Ellers and just talking about it first before we move forward, we can do that too. But I'd like to hear from the other members and see about what path you'd like to take.
Well, before, just let me say one thing. The benefit of using Ellers is that they have no vested interest because they can't issue it. And to me, that's a benefit to listening to them because they have no skin in the game. So I'm going to mute myself.
I think that's fair, Trustee Sullivan. I also think just conceptually, since we already have a relationship with Ehlers and they've offered to provide additional analysis for us in the past that, that we really haven't taken advantage of, that we really owe it to our own, finances already spent to get the maximum benefit out of that relationship with Ehlers. In addition to what Tatiana has mentioned, we cannot get all the way there with Ehlers alone, but assuming that there's a debt issuance, but we can at least see incrementally what we can do and leverage with Ehlers.
So let me just make sure then. Tatiana, I think your explanation provided clarity. So in other words, Kellers will do, we'll call it kind of the projection modeling or the cash flow, kind of just the general impact of what we're looking at. But then Kellers will have to identify, or we will have to identify, a firm that actually manages bond issuances and the actual quote unquote financing itself. Because Kellers doesn't do that because of the fact that they are in Wisconsin, it's not that, or maybe that's not their business model. And so we still are missing that core component. So then I'm fine with Kellers doing their thing. And I agree, if they can do it, let's have them do it since they're at least knowledgeable of us. And then if you need an answer as to if Kellers doesn't have a firm or firms that they know, then what I would say is 5 seemed like a fine number that Treasurer Norton proposed. Just 5, seeing which firms that would be doing the bond, that kind of stuff, and understanding what they offer, kind of their fee structure. Maybe Kellers knows a little bit about them, maybe not, but we can kind of go that route.
And then so will they also look at like what we have in reserves? The Ellers or whoever we pick to see. So I'm looking for like a plan, like a forecast also, because if we spend a lot of millions of dollars in our reserves, our investment income will go down. We won't have that much reserve that will generate that much investment. So I want to see, like, if we take whether it's $5 or $6 million out of reserve, both reserves and out of the corporate fund, how that affects the investment income, and then obviously how it affects our revenues overall for the next 5 years, 10 years.
Everything's connected. I mean, so our investments are connected to
Sure.
cloud.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean,
so would they look at do a financial analysis on that? Ellers or whoever.
Well, Ellers can do a cash flow forecast for us, but they're going to more than likely recommend that we work with someone who is versed in debt issuance in Illinois. Sure. So that's, I'm just predicting that's what's going to happen. But, and they do know somebody, Trustee Duffy, that one of the people on my list is someone that they highly recommend. They're highly rated. I did have a conversation with, felt very comfortable with. So that's why I was recommending I could pull some things together from these 5 companies that are basically statements of qualifications that show what they do, how they do, and general fee structure. And then the committee can take a look at that packet, and I can give you my recommendation, and then we could move forward with, we wouldn't sign any contracts or anything like that. At least we would have an understanding of, okay, this is the financial advisor that the committee is more comfortable working with, and we can work with Ellers with that particular advisor and moving forward. If the committee's uneasy about taking a step and looking at financial advisors at this moment, we can wait. And I can reach out to Ellers and say the committee would rather just work with Ellers first, and we'll take steps a month or 2 from now. I would like you all to tell me how you want me to proceed, because I was under the impression we were trying to seek out a financial advisor to help us. But if we want to wait a little bit, that's okay too, obviously.
I think what we need to do is decide the order of the things we need to accomplish. One of the things that this committee is tasked with is how much money do we decide as a committee do we need to keep in special reserve? If we decide, I'm pulling a number out of the air, I have no idea. If we decide that we need to keep $500,000 in special reserve, okay, we really need to decide that tonight, because that feeds a 5-year cash flow analysis, okay? We really can't involve anybody about borrowing money, because we're not going to know how much we want to borrow. And it's like, so we have to make that decision. Another decision that we have to make is what kind of instrument do we want to use to borrow money? Because if we and Ellers is going to help us by educating us about the different instruments. And then we pick the best company who issues that kind of instrument. I mean, so I don't want to get the cart before the horse. We need to decide, what are we going to do when?
I don't know if we need to decide tonight how much we need to keep in special reserve going forward. I mean, I think we need to see, excuse me, what the cost of the total project will be, exactly everything we're going to do within that project. You know, revisit that sheet from FQC. I mean, I would say it probably would be no more than $500,000. It could be even a little less than that. Depends.
Tom, we've got to start somewhere. There's some things called pencils and erasers. You put something down on paper and you start somewhere. I mean, we have to put these things down on paper, because we right now have no idea of, when you have this many moving parts, you put down something so that you can adjust variables and see the impact of it. Right now, I mean, we couldn't even ask anybody to do a cash flow analysis for us. I mean, so what's going to happen is, as soon as we decide how much that we're going to spend, we're going to say, well, we don't know how to decide what we're going to spend, because we don't know how the cash flow is going to work, and we don't know how much we're willing to take out of investments, because we don't understand what are our commitments in terms of the bonds and when they expire. And we're going to be having this same conversation and saying, we don't know in 6 months to a year from now. We have to start putting some things, paper and pencil or Excel spreadsheets, and then start manipulating and start changing. Otherwise, we're not going to accomplish anything.
But isn't that something also, whoever does the analysis for us would help us determine along with probably CCS? I mean, so
Yeah.
I would want to.
I mean, that's what financial advisors do.
Yeah, I would want to have their opinion on that too. They're going to know better than us, whether it's CCS or whoever does the analysis, financial analysis, how much we should keep in special reserve or just reserves in general. So we can always transfer from the corporate fund to the special reserve fund if we absolutely had to. So I mean, that's why I don't think we need to make that this determination tonight. Just to pick a number out of the sky and say, hey, we need to spend, or we need to keep $500,000 or whatever you think it should be in special reserve. I don't think we have to do that tonight.
Well, I mean, if you were a betting man, I would bet you that they're going to come back to us and say, what do you think you're going to need? But that's just me.
I don't think you guys are actually far apart in your remarks. I think we're all concerned about the potential circular reference that Liz indicated of, if we don't know how much we need to spend, how can we do a cash analysis? We can't do a cash analysis, if we haven't decided. Anyway, to Tom's point that we need to start somewhere, and we know it's too preliminary to start at this point. So I think we're zeroing in on, let's see what we can do to do a preliminary cash flow analysis. And as a career accountant, this would not be rocket science. There would be a lot of assumptions involved. Ehlers is intimately acquainted with our investments. CCS is acquainted with the general flow of disbursements. We also have the FQC report, as Tom mentioned, that shows, estimates of outflows for required maintenance. So we have the skeleton of what we need. We have our own operating budgets, which, are less subject to change than these major facility decisions. And we could put a shell of a cash flow analysis together to help further the next steps in our discussions, in my opinion. Didn't mean to mic drop there. Trustee Duffy, anything left?
No, you officially dropped the mic there.
Okay, so what I hear in the consensus is yes to cash flow analysis being the next step. Let's talk to Ehlers about what they can do for us. Let's also reach out to CCS to help kind of pull in their knowledge on what are the questions that the board needs to answer at this stage in order to flesh out that analysis, if anything. Obviously we have the FQC piece that's already kind of there, but we at the last board meeting, we gave each board member gave a very broad range of their tolerance level threshold with capital project budget. So if we need to go further delve into that at this point, or if it's too preliminary, no. And again, maybe after we get some of the architect interviews progressed, so that we can then see what their bids are coming in at in terms of the good, better, best options. That's another question mark at this point still. But my thought is we can at least engage Ehlers a little bit further. I think CCS might be able to help guide us a little bit further in terms of the questions that we should discuss as a board in the near term to help flesh that out.
Okay, so hold off on reaching out to other firms right now for a statement of qualification and reach out to Ehlers and CCS.
Yeah, I don't think, however long it would take to engage them, that is on such a critical path that we have to start now in order to have them in time for when we would need to be issuing bonds if we go that route. If we don't, it's not like if we don't start now, we won't be ready to have the bonds when we need the funds. I don't think we're moving that quickly.
Okay.
Going once, going twice before we move on to the next agenda item.
So if we do issue bonds at some point, though, that this will maybe look at other firms, or whether it's staying with others, but we might also at that time. I heard that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ehlers can
Gotcha.
All right. We're excited over here to move on to agenda item number 5. Am I right? No, 6. well, what's on the agenda 6, but really the 5th item, levy process review discussion. Again, I turn it over to Director Weinstein to open this discussion with some remarks on the process.
Okay. So I spoke with the chair about this particular agenda item, and we both agreed that just going over the process for the levy was a good thing to be on the agenda today. So the committee was sent a very general cheat sheet of terms that relate to this process. Again, this is just to familiarize ourselves with the timeline and how the library determines levy amount. And so for the basics, the ordinance itself indicates the amount of money our district will request via property taxes, and the funds that come via this ordinance will not be available until next fiscal year. And also, just so everybody's aware, the library attorney also reviews the draft ordinance before the board adopts the ordinance in November, because this is indeed a legal document. So when we create the ordinance, the library uses the recently adopted BNA because the library levy cannot exceed the amounts that we've appropriated in this year's BNA. And over the next couple of very busy weeks, staff will examine the previous fiscal year's expenditures, projected expenditures, and assess our fund balances using our audited numbers. Now, the library's audit will not be ready or presented until October 21st. So there is some more research to be done as we run up to the audit. And again, the board will approve the levy on November 18th. So there's about a month to analyze and also loop in Sikich to help us with some of this work because again, we don't have a finance manager, so this will be a team effort moving forward. Just so everybody's aware, also the previous year's levy ordinances are all posted on the library's website for reference, and the levy follows the same format as the BNA. And I think it merits mentioning, anytime we talk about taxes, that the library has lowered taxes, lowered the levy 3 years in a row while continuing to save for capital enhancements. And the board has been discussing these capital enhancements over the course of now, I always say 6 years, it's been like 7 years now. And I think it's quite an accomplishment that we've been able to do that. And residents deserve to know that and understand that the library has been and will remain fiscally responsible in our efforts to enhance our facility. So also, I just wanted to mention in conjunction with the levy, and if we eventually hire a financial advisor, and while we're interviewing the architects, the board should also discuss updating its special reserve ordinance to better reflect the direction of this impending capital project. So currently, the 2016 ordinance reflects a $5.6 million expenditure from special reserves. And this can be revised as the library determines its project. Again, we have not determined the project cost yet. So just as a reminder about this ordinance, it's strictly for special reserves. This doesn't reflect any expenditures from our operating reserves or any money that the library may obtain via a debt certificate. So the current ordinance provides estimates of costs for a capital project. And that's all it does. It allows for expenditures from special reserve only. So you can divvy up the categories any way you see fit, whether it's, there's a construction line or a professional fees line or an emergency line. But the bottom line is that ordinance is very similar to the BNA. It provides you that limit for funds for those specific purposes. And the limit can be any amount you like. So as long as what most attorneys would say is a reasonable amount. So, and again, you can amend it at any time. I think the last time, the last time it was amended was 2016, but before that, it was many, many years ago. I think its amount was, what, $3 million at one point. So, and then in 2016, the board raised it to 5.6. So you could adjust it as you see fit, but it should be amended because we are on the road to the capital project. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that's kind of my overview of the levy and the special reserve ordinance, and that kind of goes along with this particular capital project. Question? Sorry, I went pretty quickly.
No questions for me. Actually, can you, when you were talking about the special reserve ordinance,
Mhm.
do you mind after this meeting, Tatiana, just sending that description one more time of what you just covered? Because I don't think it's in the packet on that, just so I have it.
I'll send it's in one of the board packets for 2016, but I will send everybody the special reserve ordinance since we haven't addressed it since 2016, and I can send you my notes from just this meeting tonight about special reserve ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Sullivan, are you looking for me? Right now, there's a lot of peanut gallery noise back here, so if you have comments, feel free. I don't have much to add on this topic. Tom, were you going to say something?
I said, I think we're good.
Okay, quickest agenda item of the night. So I do feel like, unless you disagree, there's only a little bit of dissent in my room right now. But if we're ready to move on to the last topic, is everyone still feeling like there's time left on the clock to discuss? Okay, well, I'll let someone else open up the topic of things that they, I guess, to set the stage, what I'd like us to all think about is the cost benefit analysis, right? In a continuous improvement spirit, right? We're looking for ways to make things more transparent, more easy to understand for us to better do our job as trustees. And keeping in mind the cost, both the financial cost, certainly for any, outsourced per hour support needed to help with any changes, as well as the cost just of time and putting a value on everyone's time. So trying to couch that in with the thoughts, but everyone deserving an opportunity to say, how can we make this better for individual trustees who want to understand things better, and also what they think would benefit the board as a whole. So go for it.
Well, I know you guys are going to be shocked, but I do have some things that I would like us to consider. And I've simplified what I think would be helpful. And I sent everybody an email. And I don't know if you've had time to see it, and it's fine if you don't. But what it basically is it's 3 columns on a spreadsheet, and it compares the current budget to last year's actuals. And I'm thinking it would be a report that we'd only have once a year, and it would be prior to us looking at the budget and looking then subsequently at the B&A. Or maybe it would just be done prior to the B&A. We'd have to decide that. And I think it would be helpful because since it would compare what we actually spent last year to what the budget is, it would tell us, are we budgeting a lot more? Are we reducing the budget compared to actuals? And the way our financials are done today, we don't compare what the proposed budget is to what we actually spent the prior year. We compare it budget to budget, but we don't compare budget, future budget, or current year budget to the past year's expenses. I don't know if everybody had a chance to or can pull up that spreadsheet. It's pretty much simplified. It's just 3 columns of numbers.
I just want to mention, I don't know, Trustee Sullivan, did you send it to everybody or did you just send it to me?
I thought it wasn't fair to ask you to send it to everybody, so because I sent it to you so late. So I sent it to each of the Toms, but individually, and then I sent it to Jenny. I think when I sent it to you, you know what, Beth, I forgot to send it to you. I'm sorry.
Okay, I would caution against doing that in the future for any trustees sharing documents that way. And it's not particular to you, Trustee Sullivan, but I do want to say, and yeah, it did come a little late. I didn't have time to forward it because I was on some phone calls, but I know I did forward it to Beth myself, and Beth started looking at it. There are some errors in the document, but we haven't even had time to look through it completely in terms of actual numbers. So when
And you know what, Tatiana, that's great. I'm not saying that it's all right. It might be more wrong than right. I just was thinking that I developed this over a year ago, and we've never had an opportunity to discuss it.
right,
Our last finance meeting was I looked it up, it was last October. So I guess throwing it out there, letting us shoot, I mean, I don't have the ego involved in these formulas or anything else. So to at least get it in the hands of, the people sitting here, I really can't afford to make sure, Jenny doesn't get a chance. I'm sorry, Jenny, but you didn't get a chance to make sure that they were right. I'm going to say the Toms didn't get a chance. So I can appreciate it. And, if Beth can figure out where I, messed up, that is great. But I just wanted to get it out there because, and I guess this links into a lot of the stuff that I'm being told about our numbers. And when people, and it's all linked into communicating about this renovation, and people are doing more analysis on our numbers than I can do, and they're telling me things. And so the more that I have, the more I can tell them, no, that they're incorrect, and this is where they're incorrect. So if Beth can, show that, that would be great.
okay, so I just want to finish what I was going to say. It wasn't a critique on the errors, it was more about, I didn't want the committee to see the totals that you had there and think that that was correct. But I appreciate the effort in terms of the format. And you could have left all the numbers blank and the format itself could have just spoke for itself. Having the actuals and the budget and the this. So I just wanted to save everybody time if something alarmed somebody about those numbers. And it wasn't a critique of the error, it was more about the formatting. And we can take that into consideration if the committee wants to follow that type of formatting. But I do want to say that looking at actuals to budget is a good thing, and we do that because the actuals are provided in the financials every month. But to make the point that every year isn't the same from year to year in terms of the previous year's actual, so just moving last year's actual to the forward year may not always work because of projects or changes, operational changes. And also, I just want to throw in here, and you're all aware of COVID, is that we may have budgeted certain amounts this last fiscal year, but we're not going to see that same expenditure probably in some lines. So things happen during the year where you're going to look at last year and the actuals are going to look very different from the current year. So just a couple of points there.
Oh, and I agree totally. But just today, I spent an hour on the phone with a resident who wanted to know from me first of all, it started out with, how come all these other Lisle organizations are able to lay people off and the library isn't? Okay, why were you closed for 6 months? Okay, then we got into expenses. And I'm just telling you, I am out there defending the library like nobody's business. You cannot believe this. So I guess my point is, since there are people who are going to this extreme, I just want to have these conversations in between ourselves so that I am prepared to say, you know what, this is what you're going to see. And you know what, we weren't closed for 6 months. And you know what, and you guys probably know some of the people who I'm talking to because they are pot stirrers. But you know, so what I'm really trying to do is understand as much as I can so I can go to bat for us, because I totally believe in what we're doing. I totally believe. I'll shut up now. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Trustee Duffy, do you want to jump in, or I'll volley for serve over here next if you don't have a comment to throw in. Continuing on the topic of recommendation.
I would like to hear your opinion before commenting, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, again, keeping to the spirit that I tried to lay out with the baby grunting in the background. I don't know if it was fully heard or understood, but again, the splitting the difference, right, between value of time and making improvements that do have value. So I do think that there is a merit to what Liz is striving for. I think it would help all of us, honestly, if there was a way that wasn't really burdensome for us to get better alignment in the categories between the actuals, which are presented every month, and the budget, the way it's presented. I understand this from being in business that people who are not in finance and accounting are shocked that these things don't automatically align, but in the real world, honestly, they disalign more than they align. In my experience at the companies that I've worked for and audited, it's just budgeting, groupings, is not necessarily done in the same software, the same way, the same time as, sometimes pro formas start years before a company's in existence, and then accounting software does what it does, and certain people understand how to make changes to one or another. And in the case of the DNA, there's sort of a, kind of what a lawyer has already blessed for us in terms of format. So I understand there's restrictions in getting to alignment, but I'm very interested in, if it's too hard to get to alignment by either someone in-house or Sickich updating the way that the monthly reports show, maybe that's too hard because I don't know how familiar people are with the software. I'm sure it exists because it had to be created in the first place. But if that knowledge isn't there and that's too burdensome, then on the other side of that is the budget and B&A formats. And if that is sort of concrete, set in stone because it's statutorily blessed and we don't want to mess with that, then the only option left is a simple Excel bridge file, which Liz has already drafted. And then we say, hey, would it not be too incrementally burdensome for someone to update once a year this file so that everyone can have it as a supplement when we come to budget season, to be able to look at, here's the actuals by category, here's the budget by category, and really see it line up very easily. That is my hope, is that there is some option that is not burdensome and gets us a little bit easier to follow the overall flow of the financials.
I agree. I'm glad I heard your statement there, Treasurer Norton. Well, so when I saw this, Trustee Sullivan, when I want to understand, like, my current experience with a lot of budgeting is much different, of course, from a government side. So I try to also take two minds here. But often I don't see this kind of analysis provided. I'm looking at it from a different perspective because it's an apples and oranges comparison in what we're talking about here. But I do think, as I put both parts together, what may be missing, and I'm not going to get into people that are maybe diving into the finances of the library. Truthfully, there are very few people walking around that can actually go through the finances of any entity and fully understand it. That's why we have people with finance degrees and accounting degrees. And if you do it objectively, I think we are very sound in what we do. But to the point of telling a story, to explaining to people that as an entity for the last 3 years and however time, we are managed very strongly in the fiscal way. We watch and we take great pride in it, all of us do, that when someone sees all these pages of numbers, it literally is a gigantic maze. And maybe what we haven't done is fully tell that story in an executive type way. And I use the term executive not for the CEO, but more of the average resident fully understanding what we've been doing. Now, that is what I just said, probably more work than a spreadsheet, but something to think about. I don't know if even we should answer that now tonight, but I think that that's important as part of this larger facility enhancement project we're doing, is explaining to them that it's not just about the property taxes. It's about the fact that we do take pride in how we manage our money, and we do it very well. And we just had a whole conversation about, should we have a third entity as advising us, right? Like, this is kind of what we're really looking at. And things like that may be getting at what you're feeling, Trustee Sullivan, and maybe from Treasurer Norton, from your standpoint of providing that story. As far as this spreadsheet, I'm fine creating it, but I will tell you, it has limitations as to what it's really going to do, and it can be, if seen in a vacuum, it can show information that's not complete. Because I prefer to see actuals to actuals, budget to budget. I know that when you create a budget, it's based off of last year's actuals and the trending. And really what you're looking at is you always pad your budget a little bit because you never know what's going to happen. And then your B&A has a little more padding because of the authorization of the spending. Hope I just said that correctly. Tatya didn't shake her head no, so I'm going to go with yes. So there is sort of a danger, I want to put that in quotes, with this kind of spreadsheet, but I also understand that if it helps you and others get to a point, I'm okay with that. But I think it should be part of a larger effort as we kind of think about talking about our finances in a more coherent way for the residents to understand. Again, filibustered it, I bought Treasurer Norton time, so that was the whole point. Been there, done that, so I'll stop there.
We'll add any, we did adjust our financials to add the projected actuals. So we did that in the budget process, so we are happy to add another column. I do worry about adding too many columns to get messy for the public, and so I am hearing that we want I won't use, simple is not the right term, but a clean way of describing how we are managing our money, how we are expending our money. So I think we're all on the same page about being transparent about that and trying to provide a clean way of presenting it. And I know that there are some trustees who want a lot of detail, and again, we can put more columns in there, but I want it to be useful. I want it to be useful for everyone. So maybe there's a meeting in the middle of how to best present the information, as well as Trustee Duffy mentioned, a broader discussion of how to tell that story. And I think we've already kind of briefly discussed that in a previous board meeting about the renovation communication plan. So I think we're on the path.
I would want to just review the spreadsheet that Trustee Sullivan provided first, and then the question I actually have for staff though too, is the B&A, is it statutorily how it's got to be presented, like how we've been doing it all these years? Can you add columns to the B&A?
You can add columns. You mean lines?
Well, you
You
could.
can adjust
lines
the
or-
line.
Yeah, okay, so,
What column?
but I didn't know she wanted to put the actual on the B&A, because I haven't looked at her spreadsheet yet.
I don't.
Is it
not
just,
sure
is
that
it?
was-
No, I think that the goal is just to have alignment in the,
Okay, but with that, I know the problem with that though in the past too, is you do want to keep it general, because if you go specific and you overspend in one night, that we have to be.
You would have to go through a 30-day process to amend.
So
the-
that's always been the purpose of kind of being general with the groupings and not specific
Yes.
with line
For
items.
the beginning, yes.
And then, like I said, I'll have to look at I just saw briefly your spreadsheet, Trustee Sullivan, so I would want to look at it in more detail also.
Well, and as I mentioned about the spreadsheet itself, is that it could have all zeros and ones in it. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Sullivan, it was more about how you were showing the actual versus the budget. I mean, that was the point in presenting columns and showing those two columns, despite the numbers that are in there,
Okay.
right?
Right, and there's some hidden columns, including, Tom, to your point, I got the B&A on that same spreadsheet, but I really didn't want to overwhelm and make it busy.
All right.
But the B&A is in that spreadsheet, and it's just a hidden column. You know, and there's some other information too, but, you know, I wanted to go just for the real pertinent information. And not, you know, to me, this is the three columns that I showed are the real three important ones. The other ones would be kind of nice to have. So I just hid those.
All right.
So I know how you have all this spare time on your hands. So you just, you know, open up those columns and go nuts.
and really, we're only talking about two columns that take real work, because the third column is a simple percentage change calculation that should just be the same throughout. So all we're really saying is the concept here of a bridge of showing here is how the actuals are for the fiscal year, and here's how the budget is for the fiscal year, so that we can really look category by category as we're doing our due diligence for the budget season. I think it's got good merit, and I think I'd be interested in sharing that as a proposal with the whole board to say, you know, how do you get comfortable with, you know, budget numbers, you know, in terms of your own independent analysis? What do you do? And would this be beneficial to you, and help us gauge, you know, if this is really, you know, universally helpful, as I would hope it is, then, and it's a once a year exercise, a couple of columns, you know, a little bit of double checking to be done by whoever doesn't do the preparation, and then we've got ourselves a nice improvement to carry forward.
Sounds good.
Okay, that was easy. All right, I'll just throw mine out there in terms of this is my own personal preference, and so if I'm the only one who cares, then we just strike it out. But you know, as an ex-auditor, you know, one of the things that your brain becomes wired to doing is ticking and tying one report to another where relevant. And so when it comes to the investment activities and reports, I'm always looking to see, like, okay, last month, you know, I know we had this activity, and then I'm looking for that activity to be there. I'm looking for items to have moved in the totals for when we purchase things and when we sell things. And I have a hard time doing that. And I feel like there's opportunity for improvement there. It also gets kind of confusing when that money sits in the federal you know, the sort of money market down at the bottom thing, you know, when it's not quite been reinvested yet. And so I just, you know, I know conversations that you know, questions that I forwarded to Tatiana, who forwarded to Ellen, that, you know, that even they thought that there would be a way to make it a little clearer. So that's my one thing is, you know, I think we could hopefully tweak that a little bit to make it easier for us to follow the flow.
Jenny, I totally agree. To be honest, the way the investment report is now, I mean, I look at the totals, but I can't really tell what's coming in and what's going out.
If you look at the way I do it with the purchases, you know, there's, I don't have it in front of me, but there's the line which says purchases. So if there's like a purchase or two that month, you can look at the dates of purchase above with the bonds. And that's how I can tie it back usually. I don't have it in front of me, so but there's like the line, there's like the lines at the bottom that's like investment purchases. I think June investments sold. Is it at the second line? And then above has got all the bonds listed. That's how I usually tie it up, specifically with the purchases.
So what is the recommendation or what is the request?
I guess in order for me to go that step, one incremental Q&A I've got to have it. I don't actually know the interplay between the reports that Ehlers provides versus what Sikich does on our behalf. So I'm not sure who exactly would be the ones handling the editing in any given piece. Could you maybe just give us a quick overview of who handles what piece of the treasurer's report?
Sikich creates the treasurer's report from documents we get sent or pulled from Ehlers.
Okay. Okay, so in the end, Ehlers really kind of takes over the final product, even though they pull source data from it.
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that really in the end, Sikich does, even though they aren't the creator necessarily of all of the inputs, they pull some of it from Ehlers, but they, you know, they do touch every bit of the treasurer's report.
They do, and you know, they followed kind of the path from the previous financial manager, and they kept with that kind of formatting. I know there was a slight adjustment, but we can ask them to revise it. I just want to know how to ask them. What is the request?
Yeah, so maybe I don't know if we want to hash it out right here. Maybe I'll just sort of like, you know, pull together the sort of questions that I've had in terms of, and we've got those past emails, and I can just sort of bullet point and say, here's what I'm trying to achieve. Not really say, here's what we need to do, but, you know, that way leave it kind of open-ended to say, you know, hey, Sikich, what do you think is the best? That way I'm not, you know, really kind of micromanaging that. I can just sort of say, this is the goal of the information that we're trying to get to. We're trying to tie this out. We're trying to see this clearly.
Yeah, I'll agree. It's not an attractive report. It's not super simple, super easy to follow. There's no lines. So we can ask Sikich to help us with a little bit more clarity there.
Okay, that was my one, and thank you, Trustee Sullivan, for validating it. Didn't expect or need it, but thank you. Trustee Duffy, any things on your wish list?
No, I mean, it's what you just mentioned too. I have no objections to. I think, you know, it's more of how I've operated just professionally. Usually you have all the detailed data, and then most of the time I'm the guy that gets the 5-page summary. and so it's a little bit, I go through it, but it's a little, my knowledge base is challenged, right, when I go through that kind of stuff. But I always look for any ways to provide the most pertinent points, stuff to draw from as it goes from month to month. I think you kind of hit on there, Treasurer Norton, is helpful. But no, I think both things we've talked about tonight are fine to test out, see if we like it, and we can always scratch it, to use the pencil and eraser analogy from Trustee Sullivan. If it doesn't work, we don't need to stick with it long term.
All right, great. President Hummel or Director Weinstein, any other additional comments or anything on this topic? Assistant Director McClellan, anything from you?
Not tonight.
Assistant to the Treasurer is also good with her comments. She's fine. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Before you do, are we in a position where we should be hearing from and getting feedback from Ehlers in about a month? And feedback on the reports in the next month because, and the only reason I bring it up is it's so hard to get calendars to line up to schedule a meeting. Do we want to throw out some potential meeting dates tonight and have everybody check their calendars?
You want to talk about this first to get it coordinated?
Well, I mean, are you suggesting a meeting, another finance committee meeting with Ellers in attendance, Trustee Sullivan, or?
I don't know. I'm just, to leave a meeting and not know what our next steps are and when they're due, that's just not my comfort zone.
Well,
I just.
If I could make a suggestion, I mean, correct, would you just rather probably contact others, get them going and then see what the schedule would be, and then you could email the committee and what date would work at a later date?
Is it for Ellers to attend? I mean, is that?
Well, no, I mean, you could eventually, I suppose, but I guess, do you want them to do their analysis first?
That's not,
Oh,
it's for the committee to, I understand where Trustee Sullivan's going, so we don't leave the meeting without having something on the docket for next month. Well, I can send out dates via email to see if everyone's available on certain dates, but if we want Ellers to attend, I would need to let them know. So is that what the committee wants? If you don't want Ellers to attend and you just want information from Ellers, that's probably easier to accomplish, but tell me what you'd like.
I'm really split down the middle 50-50 because we've done it both ways. We've had Ellers come in and do a presentation before. We've also been able to progress things via email. And so it really, I want to hear if the other committee members have a strong leaning one way or another. I mean, another meeting might be good to get progress in a definitive time frame, and to have us hash out the next phase of these Q&A items and move forward. On the other hand, it may not be necessary. We could handle a lot of this offline in email. So like I said, I'm really torn. Anybody have a strong leaning? Trustee Duffy?
Can we just see what they, okay, so, man, I feel like we give them a definitive deadline, right? Because I think I agree with you. When you have a meeting, then you kind of make sure they want to have the content. And if they miss that deadline, then we schedule a meeting. We do it pretty quickly in that approach of getting them if they've missed it. I'm not going to assume they've missed. I think that they've been usually fine in producing their work. And then once the content comes in, if we feel like we need them to do a presentation after review, then let's have them do it. That's kind of how I would approach it.
So I guess we need a list of to-dos that came out of this meeting. And I guess one of the to-dos is we have 2 changes in reports. So I think, Jenny, you have a to-do to get to Tatiana how you want that one report, the investment report, to be altered. And I think, Tatiana, you have a to-do to look at how hard it would be for, I guess it would be Sickich who would make this current budget to last year actual report. Is that who would do it? The report that I sent. Is it Sickich you would ask to do that report?
I'm confused as to the Excel spreadsheet you sent.
Yeah. Who would do that?
That is for, I want clarification. That is a formatting option you would like for the next DNA, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that formatting, for preliminary discussion to the BNA, it wouldn't be for the BNA.
Right. I mean, if you can say now that you can do it next year, that's great.
Well, I think
But
I did. I mean, that we could add any columns that this committee is asking of us to prepare, we can do, just like we added the projected actuals. That's something staff can do.
Okay, so that one's done. So Jenny owes you information, and Ellers is, then you contact Ellers. And you also are going to ask them about meeting with us or giving us advice on educating us, I guess is the word, about the different types of ways to borrow money.
Funding options, yeah.
Okay.
And the question was, does the committee want Ellers to attend the next meeting? Or do you want me just to reach out to Ellers to provide that information and we can go from there?
Okay.
I mean, I know a year ago, Ehlers did present directly, but I also feel like while that was nice, we didn't quite need their live presence to get what we needed to get out of that analysis. That was just me personally. It wasn't like we had a lot of questions, and even if we had, that we couldn't have taken care of that outside of a meeting space. So I don't quite feel a strong desire for that.
I mean, they would attend probably via GoToMeeting, just like you are all here. And I just want to remind it that Ellers has presented us with a cash flow analysis regarding our investments. And as far as funding options go, I mean, they could probably give us some outlines of what might be beneficial in the same meeting.
That's the thing I would like to have a discussion with them live, because I think we would make a lot of good progress with them in a live conversation on that topic. Yes. So that we can sort of feed to them what the sketch of what we think we need, and they can start to meet us halfway on what they can provide.
Well, I think they could provide a lot of definition to the funding options. I'm not sure. I have a feeling, again, a hunch again, that they're going to say you should work with a financial advisor to best, meet your needs. But so I'm not feeling a big yes or no. I mean, maybe we should just invite Tammy from Ellers to our next financial committee meeting. And I can prep her, and she can probably watch this video and learn about what we want to learn about. And I have a feeling she'll be able to attend, depending on the time and the day and all that. I can throw some dates out there.
That works for me.
Yeah, and if she has any slides she can throw together that just show the different types of borrowing vehicles and could talk about them. I mean, maybe there's only 3. I have no idea. Maybe there's 20. I really don't know. But if she could do that, that would be a great education for us, at least for me.
I say we're shooting for a November meeting, a November Finance Committee meeting, and I will send dates out. I will connect with Ellers, and we'll see when everybody can meet.
Great. I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion on this? Do we do voice vote or do we just do roll call?
Roll call.
Got this.
Liz Sullivan.
Oh, yes.
Thomas Duffy.
Hi.
Before I give my vote, I just want to say thank you, Liz, for making us all take down our homework items before adjourn. And now,
You're welcome.
Thomas Sullivan.
Aye.
oh, I guess that's the end, right? Okay, motion passes. Meeting at 8:24 p.m. Central Standard Time. I just wanted to do that like Walter Cronkite. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.